All right, so what you're gonna need is a sheet with some gesture drawings. If you don't have a sheet with gesture drawings like this, you're gonna have to just draw some real quick. So you have to use the same process that I've been teaching you, where you do a line for the shoulders, a line for the hips, the line of action, which goes down to the foot that they're putting their weight on, the line from this shoulder to the opposite hip, and to the bottom of the foot they're not putting their weight on, and then you add in the arms and the legs. So you want to do a series of gesture drawings, which we did in a previous lesson, and I'll put the link to that in the description. But once you have your gesture drawings, your next step is that you're going to be adding circles wherever the body bends. So you add a fairly large one to the waist. When you go to the hips, you're going to add them in such a way, we're going to actually add ovals, but they're going to be added in such a way that they meet in the middle, but they don't extend outside the body. So they're also going to be bigger. Now you do shoulders, elbows, wrists, knees, ankles. Once you have all those in, you're going to follow this procedure. From the outside, from the inside edge here of this hip down to the knee, you're going to connect it, but with a curved line. Don't make it too straight or your person's going to look robotic. So I connect this line to this line. Again, make it curved. So from the knee to the ankle, a curved line for the back of the calf and a slightly straighter line for the front of the calf. And then you make just little squashed round shapes for the feet. I don't want you to put in a lot of detail, no fingers or any other details right now. You start from the shoulder and you go down to the elbow, again, curving your lines. From the elbow to the wrist, curving your lines, and just sort of a squashed leaf shape for the hand. Same on the other side. And now, when you connect this, do not use straight lines. It'll make the whole person look robotic. You got to curve your line from the armpit to the waist and out to the edge of the hip. Make sure you curve it, okay? Now, I'm going to do that for a few of these. So again, so now for this one, and it goes faster each time you do it. After a certain point, you kind of don't need the circles and the dots anymore because you kind of get what you need to do. But don't forget there's a joint there where the body bends. That's really important because the arm goes in wherever there's a joint. So a lot of people don't make like the arm go in at the wrist. Okay, so now once you have the basic person fleshed out, you're going to need to take a piece of scrap paper, some piece of paper that you don't really care about, and you're going to throw it underneath your artwork. And the reason why is because we're going to be using Sharpies, and Sharpies will bleed on your table and ruin your table. So you're going to use two different Sharpies. You're going to use the thin one and the ultra thin one. We're going to start off with this one, which is thicker than the other one. Okay? Now I want you to imagine off the edge of the paper, somewhere off the edge of the paper, that there is a light source. Okay? So do not draw a sun anywhere on your paper. Just imagine somewhere off here in the distance there is a sun that's not on your paper, okay? And that sun has light emanating from it, and that light is emanating in a straight line. As we all know the laws of physics, light can only travel in a straight line. So, that being said, the light hits here, but it can't reach here because it's got to travel in a straight line. It can't help it. It's light. So, the light hits this side of the arm, but it can't get to this side because it's traveling from here. Okay? The light hits this arm that's reached around the back, but it can't get this underside here. Okay? The light hits here, but it can't get there. The light hits the top of his foot, but it can't get the underside of his foot. It hits the top of this foot, but it can't get the underside. It hits here and it hits here, but it can't get around to here or here. So once you have figured out every place that's going to have shadows, make them consistent for all the people that you drew. So all of them are going to have consistent shadows. So the right side of this guy, the right side of his neck, his arm, his hand, his waist. But you know the light's going to hit directly there, so don't mess up and outline it. Okay? The light's going to hit here, but it's not going to hit here. It is going to hit the top of his foot, but it's not going to hit the bottom of his foot. It's going to hit this part of his arm, but it can't get under there. Okay? And it's probably going to actually be able to get here a little bit, but this part probably is going to get full sun because it's facing straight towards it. Now, once you've done this, and you can make the lines a little tiny bit thicker if you want to. If you did it correctly, it's still going to look like a person even after you erase the pencil lines. So at this point, if I erase the pencil lines, I'm still going to see a person there. It still looks like a person, okay? And I'll try it on this one too. As a matter of fact, it looks more three-dimensional because the pencil lines aren't there. The eraser taking away the pencil lines, the Sharpie lines, because they're just where the shadows are, they really make the whole thing pop. Okay, so if you did it correctly, you'll see an indication of a human being there, despite the fact that half the lines are actually gone. And it gives you a very dramatic sense of light. That sense of light is called Chiaroscuro, which is an Italian word derived from light and dark. And it basically is, was developed, a technique developed during the Renaissance in Italy to create dramatic lighting. So the next step is you're going to use your ultra-thin Sharpie. You're going to imagine, and we're going to use a technique called crosshatching. You're going to imagine, and I'm going to zoom in here, that you're actually drawing on his thigh, okay? So let me just look here. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to use a method called sit and lift. So if I just zoom in here, I'm going to show you. I've got this heavy line where the shadow is, okay? And if I lift up my marker slightly, my line actually gets thinner as it goes up, okay? So with every brush stroke I make, if I was using a paintbrush, that line has to get thinner as I get up. And I'm imagining I'm drawing on a round surface. So in addition to the line getting thinner as it goes away from the edge, I'm also curving my line, okay? And we're going to use a technique called crosshatching, which means you need to do a second set of lines that are also curved and also lift up as you go away from the edge. So you always start at the darkest line and go out, never towards the darkest line. You still lift up your pen so that the lines get thinner as they go out, and it kind of looks like a checkerboard. That's why it's called crosshatching. And now you have to do a third layer of lines that start at the black line, but don't go as high. So they're going to stop here, but you have to lift your marker when you're making them. So you're going to get this very dense area that's going to get gradually less dense, and it's going to give the feeling of volume to your work. So I'm going to take this, I'm putting it here. Okay, let me just go here to his leg, and I'm just lifting, and I'm actually imagining that I'm drawing on a real thigh. I'm imagining that I'm drawing on a real kneecap. I'm imagining that I'm drawing on a real calf, and I'm curving my lines out. I'm imagining that I'm drawing on a real foot, and I'm lifting my marker as I'm doing it so that the lines get gradually thinner. Now let me just zoom out a little. That's the first set of lines. And now lifting. There's my second set of lines. So it's starting to give you the feeling of volume. So I'm going to do that to the whole thing. Sit and lift. Make sure your lines are curved. Make sure they start in the black line and come out, and that they get lighter as they go out. Do it in a second direction so you get that sort of checkerboard look. And you do that for the entire person. I'll show you how it looks in the end. And this is called crosshatching. And the technique of creating dramatic lighting in art is called Chiaroscuro. So now, we're going to compare the different stages of this assignment, okay? This one was just the stick figure gesture drawing. This was the gesture drawing fleshed out to make it more like a human being. This is adding the beginnings of dramatic shadows, and this is adding a little bit of volume to the dramatic shadows. So you can see the stages of the artwork and how it gets to a stage of completion. Final step in this process is to put a little bit of shading on the ground underneath the figure. So you always shade from left to right because the floor is a flat surface. Don't try and shade up and down because it won't look like the shadows falling on the ground. You make the shadow go away from the figure, starting right underneath the figure, and the light that the direction that's opposite the sun, and the shading is going to be darkest right underneath the figure and get gradually lighter as it goes out, and then you put a darker shadow directly underneath the feet or whatever surfaces are touching the ground. That's going to be the very darkest area of all. So again, you start where the feet are touching the ground, and you move in the direction away from the sunlight, but in a left to right motion so that it feels as if the shadow is sitting flat on the ground. And that cast shadow will keep your figure from looking as if it's floating. It's very important to ground your objects when you're shading a picture so they don't look like they're floating in the middle of the page. So that last little step is very important. Notice how I'm using 3 different shades of gray, lighter as it's farther away, a mid-tone as it's closer, and the darkest shadow of all would be directly underneath the feet to really ground the figure, make it look like it's really, give it weight and give it a sense that it's sitting on a surface.